Thank you, Michelle, for joining me today. So today on the Strong, Healthy and Glowing podcast, I have Michelle Larson joining me. Now, Michelle is a holistic practitioner and energy healer from Minnesota in the US. And I wanted to have Michelle on today because previously, I guess, I'll be open, I've been a little bit hesitant with things like energy healing and that kind of thing. But there is so much, and energy plays such an important role in our life that, you know, regardless of what your take is on things like that, there is so much to it, and energy is so important. So I think regardless of what your take is on some of these modalities and that kind of thing, there is something that a lot of us can take away from, or almost all of us can take away from these modalities. And whether you embrace them wholeheartedly, which some people do and some people love them, or whether you are remaining resistant and you just take the nuggets, I really encourage you to be open today and to some of the nuggets that may come out from our conversation. So, Michelle, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me on. And to any of the listeners, thank you for just having an open mind to just see what, take what resonates and leave the rest. That's kind of the best way to move through any interviews, right? Like that's what we do. So yeah, as she said, I'm an intuitive energy healer and holistic practitioner. And inside of my energy healing, I will do these intuitive soul readings, they're called, or intuitive child codes. And in these sessions, I read through someone's higher self. I kind of give you a picture of what your higher self looks like, what you're up to in this lifetime. I'll read through your chakras, see if there's any blocks, imbalances, if there's anything in your past lives that need healing, and then also kind of your path and purpose. So where are you going? Are you on that track or off of that track? And what are you really here to do and anchor in inside of this lifetime? And many other things inside of the energy healing that just come up spontaneously and organically. There is also a little bit of medium aspect in there as well. So sometimes past loved ones will come through with messages. I really am open to whatever your higher self would like to do inside of those sessions. And then in the holistic practitioner realm, I do a form of muscle testing. And inside of this, I get to a root cause of whatever somebody's concerns are. So if they've got really bad skin issues or stomach aches and bloating, and they've tried XYZ diets and they've tried medications, they've tried supplements, they've tried a million things, it's usually where they find me and the muscle testing to say, okay, what is this? And at the very root of it, we can see ooh, it's none of these foods. It's actually, maybe it's a pathogen, or maybe it's like a toxicity of chemicals or metals or something in your water, something in your air. We can look and get really specific and then start to clean out the body through supplementation, different modalities, which I get to muscle test your body to see what it wants versus just kind of oh, you have a stomach ache and you tested for heavy chemicals, we're going to throw you on this protocol. It's no, what does your body want? It was really fun to kind of unfold and customize a program for all my clients based on what their body actually wants.
And that is, I think that is so important because we're all going to be slightly different. And regardless of where you come at these things from, I think everybody is different. And, our muscles and our bodies are going to call for different things. So
Exactly.
Customized programs, that's right up the alley of what I do. And, you're right online with that same philosophy, which I love. So, our muscles obviously call for different things, and we do store things like toxins and that kind of thing in our body. So where do you come at things like cleaning up your body and protocols and getting rid of toxins and that kind of thing? What are some of your recommendations for that kind of thing?
Yeah, I usually use I see what people are testing for as kind of the guide to start to clean things up. A model that I like to use is the good, better, and best. And so it's we always work on a gradient scale. We're not going to I have some go-getters who want to go home and like clean out the entire cupboard and throw everything away. But sometimes financially or just in a emotional overwhelm, people don't want to do that. And so we start with swapping, their cleaning products, some of their skincare products, just things like, especially if they're testing for chemicals, we think of like parabens, phthalates, like there's so many of them. But I can test specifically like, ooh, what's this? And we can start to look at, skincare and beauty. That's why it's so perfect what you do, Sarah, in like an aspect of your business, because you are one of the companies that test well for people and that I recommend. So that's the fun thing we can say, ooh, like like your skincare isn't working for you. There's maybe chemicals in there that keep causing these breakouts or kind of act as a band-aid. Then we can say, well, which ones work? And then we just muscle test through the different lines that are out there. But usually we start with just kind of swapping. So like, okay, depending on how bad it is, but we're kind of like, okay, like you're going to start a new cleaner. You're going to not have air fresheners. Like we're going to grab your skincare line. Like, how do you feel about that? And really just sliding them in that good, better, and best model where they're like, I can't afford a whole new line. Okay, great. How about the daily cleanser? Start with one thing. And then we just start to slowly reduce the toxic load is like the biggest kind of key to really starting to move people's bodies in the right direction. So in this work, it's not like I'm putting things on you and then your body is in a reaction healing from it. It's like we just support the body to do what it innately knows to do. We start to open pathways, we start to support the organs, and then the organs wake up and they start to go, they do things, and they're like, oh, I can drain these out. Like the kidneys are like, I can filter toxins now, and it's so beautiful when it starts to work like that, because we're reducing that chemical load, that toxic load from swapping products, from drinking cleaner water. Sometimes there's emotional components, or even, I mean, I'm the energy healer, so I see a lot of this, but in the spiritual and energetic realms, those can be things that really hold people's bodies in a state of stress, and then they don't want to change. The body itself doesn't.
Yeah, I love that. Switching over one product at a time, switching things over as you run out, for instance, rather than going all overboard and getting overwhelmed with the cost and the choice of going a whole new range. So, are you running out of your serum? Are you running out of your cleanser? Replace that as you run out, as opposed to here you go, whole new range, throw everything out. Because I think a lot of people get overwhelmed by that and they think they've got to throw everything out. And it's like, well, as you say, good, better, best.
Yeah.
Sure, great. If you can afford it, go the whole hog, throw everything out and replace everything. But for most of us, particularly at the moment, a lot of people are going to go, oh no, I can't afford that. So, that is so, so good. So when you mentioned energy and stress before. So I'd like to get into that and how energy levels and stress and all of those good things can relate to toxicity and how our body's functioning. So would you like to sort of build out that side of things for us as well, please?
I would love to. So when I first started this work back in 2015 as a client, I started like receiving muscle testing, going through it, having amazing results. And then I was like, how can I do this? So I went and got trained in 2016 and have been like working with clients and really transforming their health ever since. So since 2016. And inside of that, kind of where I originally did a lot of my training, we were really only working with physical toxicity. So like immune challenges, foods, metals, and chemicals. And inside of that, we would get people very far. They would feel so great. They'd get to a certain point, and then kind of there were a good few clients who just never really got like totally better. Even myself included, where it was like I'd feel better than I was, but I'm not like vibrant and thriving and like just full of energy. And so it's like, what's this missing component here? And kind of the deeper I went into training, into work and whatever, then we added this like spiritual and energetic aspect or an emotional aspect. And we could start to see that emotions are getting trapped in the body, which now saying it out loud seems so funny that we didn't consider that in 2015. But, you don't know what you don't know. And that's what I would say to any listeners too, as you start to go down this clean health, clean living. You don't know what you don't know. So if you invested in huge programs and or product lines and things like that aren't very clean, it's okay. You didn't know, and now you do. And so we use that gradient good, better, best model. But it's really interesting. I'll go back to the energetic spiritual component, where we'll have different I'll talk about parasites, where like everybody has parasites. So like disclaimer, we all have them. We can't like rid our body of them like 100%, because they're actually a part of our ecosystem. They're a part of like the microbiome that is our body. And so it is to keep them within a balanced range, as opposed to this like running rampant range that they have been inhabiting our bodies. Like they are taking over, and that is not healthy. So disclaimer on the parasites, they're everywhere, but they can hold on to emotions. Or spiritually, I've seen parasites that have like past life energy or imprints on them, and until we remove, like either we identify the emotion and clear it, or kind of help you move through an emotional process, or spiritually go back and like cut cords and heal that past life, that parasite doesn't move through. And so it's very fascinating to see that in somebody's program, where we're kind of like, okay, these, and I measure everything in like a resonance test, and so I kind of know, I'm like, these parasites, the number's not improving, kind of what's underneath of it, what's in the way. We've done whatever. I'm like, oh, we got to go and do a past life healing, or we've got to, address some emotions. We have some anger underneath the liver, which is where these trematodes are hanging out, which are liver flukes. But does that kind of answer that a little bit?
Yeah. And there's actually been scientific studies done on the gut microbiome and how that affects our mental health. And, I read a study a couple of months ago, actually now, that actually went into how the gut microbiome can affect mental health conditions like depression and anxiety and that kind of thing. And I think that's sort of very, very similar to what you're saying. I mean, it's possibly not exactly the same. I mean, we're not talking about liver fluke or anything like that here, but it's very, very similar, I think, along those lines, that your gut and how that's behaving has actually been shown in some scientific studies to affect conditions like depression and anxiety and that kind of thing. And that's, your emotions and mental health are all bound up in that same sort of axis, I guess. And they actually call it the gut-brain axis. So I think that's so, this is so interesting. So we've mentioned muscle testing a few times here. Could you elaborate a little bit on the muscle testing side of things for us? Because a lot of us, coming from a science perspective, I tend to think of things like a muscle biopsy, where they'll send things off to the lab and that kind of thing. But I'm guessing this is potentially a little bit different. So I'd love to hear more.
Yeah. So a muscle testing, there's many different ways to muscle test. So that is one, it's a very big like umbrella term. I know, let's see, like applied kinesiology is one of them. So a lot of people will see the applied kinesiology, muscle testing, NRT, nutrition response testing, where you're in a chiropractic office or some sort of healthcare office. They're holding out your arm and they're pushing on it, and they're seeing like, what does the body have to say? And a strong is a certain response and a weak is another response. That is muscle testing. And so we're using the nervous system to see what it has to say about certain things. So in in-person sessions, you can actually hand them like a vial, which has the same frequency of something, but you could use an apple, or you could use like a physical thing and have them hold it and see, does this crash your system? Does this agree with you? Right? Like we want strength. If I'm just seeing if your body has strength, I want it to be strong. Now, if we're holding something, we're asking like, does this crash the system, or does this keep this strong? And of course there's variation from there, but it's a way to access the system and see what does it have to say. I always like to say to my clients, I'm like, I'm just the investigator and then the telephone. I just tell you what your body can't say to you, where I'm like, ooh, the liver, even in-person sessions, I'll like, you'll use acupressure points and we'll be over the heart, we'll be over the liver, and then it crashes. I'm like, ooh, there's not very much strength here in the liver. Now in my practice, I do a lot of virtual testing, and then I will just establish a way to have a strong or a weak or locked, unlocked response, which would be as if you were standing in front of me with this. The virtual work in the muscle testing world goes a little bit over people's heads, but the long and short of it is we're looking for a nervous system response.
Yeah, interesting.
Mm.
Guess that may be of interest to people who are listening, so that you do virtual work as well. So yeah, something to bear in mind. And if that's something that interests you, we'll put all of Michelle's details in the notes later on so you can get in touch as well. So yeah, I'd love to dig in a little bit more to the muscle testing side of things and the emotional side of things. So when you identify imbalances and the like in that area, what do you then offer, or how do we then go about rectifying those things? Because I know we've spoken about toxicity and that kind of thing, but from the muscle testing side of things and a strength side of things and supporting the body side of things, where do we go once we've identified those imbalances?
Yeah. So with anything like a physical toxicity or like a chemical imbalance, most of the time those will kind of balance out with supplements or with some sort of like herbal tincture and things like that. So those are very much like, we have this thing and we're going to put you on this remedy or this supplement and it's going to balance and help pull it out of the body. Now, where emotions and spiritual things are concerned, it's not always that simple. We don't have spiritual supplements. We do have homeopathy, which like I'm not like a homeopath, but it can work very well because it works on like a vibrational level. When I have clients who test it for emotions, for spiritual things, or kind of anything there in between, what I love to do is just ask their body what they want. So let's say it's emotions. I'll do like, ooh, is emotion code going to help this? Which is another type of modality that helps kind of clear and move through emotions that are trapped in the body. MBSR, so mind, body, spirit release, is another one that's really good for emotions. Psyche balancing, essential oils are really great for that. Sometimes we're like, ooh, is it a deep tissue massage? Sometimes it's so interesting what comes up because I'm like, all of these normal modalities, or is it because I do the energy healing? I'm like, ooh, is it a session with me, or is it a session with my friend, or is it, we kind of just have this little network between all of us healers here, but we see like what is going to really shift that out. I've recently, just in this second half of this year, gotten into the Healy. Have you heard of the Healy? It's like a handheld frequency device.
I think someone's mentioned it, but yeah, if you could elaborate a little bit.
Yeah, so it's so incredible. So that is one that I will test for people as well, in that component, and that works really well. The Healy works well for physical, chemical, toxical or toxicants, emotional, energetic. Like it really can tap on all different things. So when I have clients who have a Healy or want to get one, we're like, ooh, we can move the needle with one device very quickly, which is very fun to see. The Healy itself is in like the mumbo jumbo term of it is a handheld Healy or healing frequency device. So I actually have mine like right here, but it's like super teeny tiny, fits in your pocket, and essentially it will do bioresonance scans. So it'll kind of like read my energy field, read my body, and then based on what it picks up, it will recommend a program for me. So it's like, oh, you need something with bioenergetic defense. And then it's like, okay, now we're going to send that frequency to your body. So it starts to balance out and heal with that. So it's super interesting. And there's a few different like emotion programs in there as well that I've seen move those emotions like through people. And of course, as like a caveat, like I never have any modalities take place of actually feeling our emotions. So it's kind of like there are some clients where it's like it's buried so deep and we don't want to feel it. And we're like, where's the easy button? Where's the quick fix? We're not looking at band-aids. We're really looking at that deep excavation So that's it's good. It's great to have the access with the Healy and with the oils and with supplements and with things, but it's like, oh, we're not just gonna blanket. Like we really do want to address where this came from and how this gets rooted up, because that's our true ticket to healing versus just which is why I'm like root cause, everything to root cause versus band-aids and blankets.
Yeah, so it's almost like electromagnetic frequencies kind of thing by the sounds of things. Yeah. And that's, when we look at it, our brain and our nervous system, that's exactly what our brain and our nervous system runs off. So I know I've got clients who would be very sort of skeptical of that kind of thing. But when you look at it and when you break it down, our whole nervous system is running on basically electromagnetic signals. And that's why you get yoga studios that play, I guess it's a similar sort of thing. You get yoga studios that play music that resonates and vibrates at a certain frequency because it's to help calm the mind and the nervous system. So it's exactly the same kind of, and as much as we can sit there and say it's, a bit woo-woo, or some people will say it's woo-woo, it's a lot of these things and modalities have some basis. When you boil it down and research them, they've got some basis in reality and in science.
Yeah.
So I think it's really, really interesting to sort of see. So would you like to elaborate a little bit more on how emotions and that kind of thing can affect our body and can affect our mind, our skin, and the works? Because I guess toxicity that we talk about, so products and cleaning products, skincare products, food and that kind of thing, are related as well to emotions and vice versa. So would you like to sort of elaborate on the interplay between those two areas?
Yeah, so we generally speak to, like, I say we as in like most muscle testers who've gone through similar training. It's like we kind of identify the human body as like having three components. We have the physical, the spiritual, and the emotional. Like we make like a little triangle, and really you can't focus on only one or two of them, because then you'll be missing like a very key part of it. So we'll, it's kind of like, who came first, the chicken or the egg? Like which one is, why is this out here? We're not sure if it was an emotion that got embedded and then the nervous system fried, which then led to the body being super tired, or if the body was tired, which had us be more susceptible to pathogens, and then an emotional component to the tired. Like we just really, sometimes it doesn't matter what came first in terms of like how it got there, but then it's like, how do we get it free from the body, or how do we have it so that it isn't impacting you? Because it really is, it's really all three of them. And unless we look at all of them on the whole spectrum, like we don't see people actually improving in their health and keeping it. So we'll see like, kind of like that, like whoop, we get a little bit better and then we crash back down, and we get a little bit better and that yo-yo effect. We see that a lot for like, I'm only working on the emotional aspect. Well, we still have to look at the physical things that are happening. Or I see it a lot in my like spiritual community where people are so deep in the energy and spiritual work, which is fantastic. And it isn't enough if we're not touching the emotions and feeling as a human being should, and looking at what we're consuming in terms of foods and products and really just like everything that gets stored. So in the body, there's a really good, well, Louise Hay talks about it a lot, like You Can Heal Your Life. And she kind of has all the different symptoms or ailments that people have, and then what it means, where it's like, ooh, if you're experiencing like liver spasms, it means this is happening. Or I've seen, what is it? Now I can't remember what this is, but there's, The Body Keeps the Score is a really good book as well. And so it talks about in a lot of these books, and they've even, I want to say that there's some studies about this too, where they'll talk about if you have negative thoughts and if you have patterns, or if you have something that comes up and you don't speak it, it will start to manifest in different ailments. So a lot of people who have a lot of resentment and anger but never speak typically develop thyroid issues. I see it time and time again where somebody's throat chakra is blocked or their thyroid is like super inactive or overactive, and there's like a ton of emotions hiding on top of that thyroid. And I'm like, well, okay, actually, it's not iodine. It's not, LH therapy. It's not pig hormones. It's actually speaking your truth, releasing these emotions that have been buried and hidden for so long. Um, and there's so many other examples of that. But really, when we don't feel our emotions, the body starts to respond and react to that. And then we see it break down in physical ailments.
It's so true. It's so true. Like it is all very much linked. And I think that's super important that we don't just deal with one aspect, that we deal with all of those elements of the body and the mind and, physical, emotional, spiritual elements, because we all, as human beings, we are all of those things all sort of thrown into one package. So that kind of nicely leads into a question that I ask all my podcast guests. What does strong, healthy, and glowing mean to you?
I love this question. So strong, healthy, and glowing to me really is it's it's not so much like a state of being, but it's like a state of feeling. So for me, it's really like I feel alive in my body. I can sense emotions. I feel nourished with what I'm eating. Like in the glowing aspect, I feel that mostly when I'm inside my work and my purpose. But really, it's just like it's a state of feeling and it is a state of being actually, because you feel zen and you feel like you've like reached a destination and you've kind of like got things figured out. So it's like for me, it's eating the right foods for my body type, because I know what I do know. It's keeping my emotions flowing instead of blocking and resisting them, and then spiritually staying good, where I'm in flow, I'm in connection, and then serving that forward is really my like best state of feeling in what that question is. I don't really know if I answered that, but that I'm like,
no.
Whole feeling, whole vibe.
Yeah. Well, it's what it means to you, not what it means to me. So, I mean, I think what strong, healthy, and glowing means for me might be completely different to what it means for someone else. And I guess that's the whole thing, to draw out those different elements of what these different things mean to different people, and how we can all be expression strong, healthy, and glowing, but look completely different. So yeah, so important. Now, you've mentioned a couple of books and that kind of thing there. So what are some, I guess, maybe a couple of key tips and takeaways for people out of this episode? So you've mentioned some books that people can read. Is there anything that you can suggest that people might want to do or look at if they're looking for more resources, or, if they're looking to improve themselves in these areas? Recommendations can you make for us?
Yeah, so definitely the two books I mentioned, Louise Hay, she has several books, but like You Can Heal Your Life, You Can Heal Your Body are really great books that kind of depict what it means to create suffering in our body and how we can kind of store and harbor things and then how it manifests, and then really taking your power back. The Body Keeps the Score is really good because it just shows us like kind of how the body responds to our way of being, in a very simple way. And one tip I'd have that I'd just say is like kind of the best to just start. It's kind of like, oh, you're just picking it up. You're just starting to look at these things. It's like paying attention to where our food comes from, where our products come from, what is in them. So like when I first started on this journey, it was very much like in the grocery store, in the market, like reading all the ingredient lists and going to meet the farmers. And, like I'm trying to get my food source a lot closer so that I can meet the people who are growing the foods and that they're doing it right. So that's a big thing I see with food a lot. And then products, really looking at what are the companies doing? Not necessarily in terms of like what they're saying, but like behind the scenes, what are they doing? Can we ask them where they're sourcing products? Can we see what's in things? I know some companies don't tell you, and you're like, I need to know what's in your skincare line. I need to know what's in this spray or whatever it may be. So really just kind of being that educated consumer. And that just starts, again, you don't know what you don't know. So do not make yourself wrong. But it just starts with curiosity. You're just curious. What is in here? And then you're kind of like, I don't know what that is. And maybe you Google it, or maybe you go to and see what it is. It's kind of like, don't just take the first hit on a search engine, because that will often scare people. But then you just see, you're like, okay, enough of this and enough of that. And you're like, maybe I know I don't want to have this in my body anymore, or let me talk to someone, So just get curious and start to just be aware of like, oh, wow, I never realized that had XYZ ingredients and so forth. Yeah.
Yeah. It's so important to have a look at those ingredient panels and that kind of thing. And I think particularly with food, one thing I always say, there is a place for things like, I always say to my PT clients, there's a place for things like a good quality protein powder if you're busy and your only other option is going to be fast food. I really encourage you to look at things like a good quality protein powder, but then have a look at the ingredient panel on that protein powder. And, it's one thing I often get asked is, I know there's a couple of brands of protein powder out there that actually do have cane sugar in them. And, I look at it and I go, the way I approach it with some of my clients is sugar in itself, when it is actually cane sugar and it's not the super duper refined one, that can actually, if you want something slightly sweet, that can actually be better for you than the artificial sweeteners that are out there. Because your body at least is more likely to recognize that as a real food as opposed to a chemical soup. And it's more likely to be better digested by your body. So, I think one thing I always say to people, look at the ingredient panel, and there's always, particularly with skincare products and that kind of thing, because they do use scientific names for things, there's often going to be things that you don't recognize in skincare products and that kind of thing. But in food, generally, a lot of the things on there, I think you should be able to recognize in some way, shape, or form. And things like, sure, there's going to be things like, some protein powders and that kind of thing have pea protein isolate and that kind of thing, but at least you can recognize that it has come from a pea, as opposed to where does this come from? It says protein isolate, but what is that from? So, recognizing where those things come from. And I love that one about, going to the farmers markets and that kind of thing and learning where your food comes from. Is it coming from the farm down the road, or is it coming halfway across the country and being shipped in cold storage for like 5 months before it gets to you?
Right. Yeah.
And it's an interesting one, because we're starting to come into summer here and we're starting to get some of the summer fruits coming out and that kind of thing. And you're looking at, as much as I love summer fruits, it's always early in the season. You get some stuff that comes through sort of early in the season and you still look at it and go, is that really this season?
Right.
So yeah, it's
how is my strawberry the size of a baseball? You're like, that's interesting. You just be curious.
Yeah. And there's always going to be flukes of nature, but when all of the strawberries in the punnet are
yeah. Oh.
Interesting, right? So, well, thank you so much for those tips, Michelle. And I'd like to throw it over to you one last time. If people are interested in the work that you're doing, what do you have on offer at the moment, and how can people work with you, and how can they find you?
Yeah, so my best mode of finding me is going to be on Instagram at Michelle Marie Larson. I'm sure we'll put it in the show notes as well. And then if you're looking for energy healing, usually the first thing I'll have people do is either an intuitive soul reading if you want it for you, or an intuitive child codes reading. And inside of those, like I have a pretty good description, which you can find in my link in my Instagram bio. Or you can just message me if you have like a customized, I do customize energy healing based on what people need as well. So you can find that there. And then in terms of the muscle testing and the root cause practitioner, like all of the things that we discussed over here in the realm of health, toxicity, pathogens, that would be inside a muscle testing visit. So an initial visit would be the best place. I do have little like 15-minute calls so we can see, are you a good fit? Would you benefit from this work? Because I don't want anybody to waste time and or money at all. I really want people who are ready to heal themselves and kind of change their story. And then I will say too, if you don't find, especially being like, across the pond and down over, if you don't find times, let me know, because I have kind of set hours and I can always kind of open up like a different slot for people too. But yeah, thank you.
Nice. And I'm just going to throw it back to one little thing. I know this is backtracking a little bit, but we didn't really mention, you've mentioned intuitive readings and that kind of thing in that last little bit. And I mean, I know a lot of podcasts, and I know a lot of my clients come at things from tend to sort of on the scientific end of things, but just to backtrack a little bit, would you like to elaborate a little bit on that side of things just before we finish off?
Yeah. Are you wondering just like what
it is and how it fits with the other things that you do?
Yes. So what it is, essentially, I will go into like a meditative space and then connect with someone's higher self. So when we energy healers and intuitives refer to a higher self, it is kind of like the you who has lived all the lifetimes. It's like if you were in your body and you have your soul, it's kind of like, what does that version of you have to say? Because we are like having a human experience in this lifetime. And so then it's working with that higher self aspect to see kind of what do we need to know that's going to help set you free or help keep you kind of out of the trenches in terms of what you're up against in this lifetime. So I'll see that come through for people when they're like stuck on their path and they're like, what am I going to do for a job? Or what am I going to, I need to switch careers. What does that look like? Or should I have kids? Should I not have kids? Like there's a lot of very contemplative questions that really, when you work with the higher self, it's not me telling anyone. It's more or less connecting you to this deeper kind of like God, source, universe aspect of yourself so that you can find your own answers from within. And I'm more or less just the conduit that helps that connection happen. So does that answer that part of it?
Yeah, it does. Because I mean, I'll be honest, I've never really had much to do with that kind of modality and that kind of thing. And I guess, a lot of my listeners, if they've come to me for PT or something like that, or personal training, they may not have, come across that kind of thing before as well. So I just thought that'd be useful to unpack that a little bit before we finish off. So thank you for joining me today, Michelle. So just to recap, if we've got a couple of resources there that I'll pop in the show notes. There's a couple of books from Louise Hay and all of Michelle's info. And I'm guessing the booking link in your link in bio if someone wants to book a time with you as well. Nice. So there'll be that in the or link to Michelle's Instagram in the show notes as well. So you can jump over there and get in touch with her. If you've got any comments or questions, there's a little comment section down below as well. And I'd be happy to pass on any questions you might have, Michelle, as well. So yeah, if there's anything we can help with, please feel free to reach out. Thank you for joining me today, Michelle. Is there anything you'd like to finish off with that I haven't asked you?
I just want to say thank you, and thank you facilitating this and for being really like the speaker and the vessel and really like the investigator for all of your clients and your listeners to have these conversations, to expand them, to deepen awareness, and really just start to kind of like, knock on doors. Like, is this a door that your clients are interested in? Maybe so, and they'll get a taste before they have to actually walk through it. So I really love that. And then for the listeners, really just, I think I said it before, but really just give yourself grace for what you didn't know and then just stay curious. It's kind of like going back to that childlike wonder. And then if there's, if I'm hearing like, funny in the intuitive sense, but it's like in the childlike wonder, if there's something that is resonating with you in this conversation or something that's pulling you forward, but you can feel your mind doesn't understand it, we can like there's something for you inside of any of this, like whether it be the rest of this conversation or an appointment or even just like just connecting. But it's like that's usually that little tiny voice that's saying like, yes, do it. It's like, what is this? Where is that coming from? That's our intuition. So it's cute when we get very science literate. I love science. I'm such a nerd in that sense, and it's my favorite. But we wrestle with our minds so much where we're like left brain, right brain, and so just letting the intuition flow through, and you're like, okay, that's permission to be experiencing that grappling of the two sides of the brain is totally normal.
That's Thank you so much for sharing, Michelle. Yeah, as I said, Michelle's Instagram will be linked in the show notes below. It'd be great if you would reach out to her if you've got any comments or questions, or feel free to reach out to myself and I'm happy to put you in touch and answer any questions. Thank you so much for joining me this morning, Michelle. I hope you have an amazing rest of your day. To all the listeners, have an amazing rest of your day as well. And we look forward to speaking with you soon.
Thank you.